What is a personal mystery that bothers you until today? Story 1. When I was 9 years old, I woke up around 11 p.m. and wanted a glass of water. So I went downstairs. I got halfway down the stairs when my dad turned around to look at me and freaked out. I had blood all down my leg and a huge gash. I had to go to the emergency room and get 9 stitches. It was a really deep wound. I had no idea how it happened. When we got home, we looked at the bed and there was a single drop of blood on the white sheet I had been sleeping on. No other blood anywhere, nothing sharp nearby, no springs sticking out of the mattress or anything that could have caused it. I asked my dad recently about this, assuming I had misremembered and there was a logical explanation. But no, he says they never found out what caused the deep wound on my leg. Story 2. I lived in a small apartment at the top of a short, unremarkable building. I always kept everything locked at night because, big city. One morning, I got up and found a shiny lapel pin in the shape of a TV company's logo on top of the fridge. And it was lower than my head height, so I saw the fridge top clearly every time I went into the small kitchen. There was nothing else on the fridge and only the ceiling above it. No one else had been in the apartment for days. Everything was still locked, windows included. I had never seen that pin before, and I had no connection to anyone associated with the TV company. I've always wondered where that lapel pin came from. Story 3. Here's something that's been happening for about 15 years. It doesn't seem to bother anyone but me. Glasses started disappearing from the kitchen. At first, I thought it was my teenagers just being careless. I'd rant and search through the house, including under beds. I never found a single glass. So then I thought they were taking them with them when they left. Never caught them doing that. I started buying plastic cups and asking them to use those. They just looked sideways at me and said, okay, no one used the plastic cups. Kitchen glasses still vanished. When I got down to the last 3 or 4, I'd buy another set that matched the old ones. After a few years, I started buying different styles so I'd know what went missing when. It was bizarre. Everything would be fine. Then suddenly several glasses would disappear. The missing ones always matched. Thinking I wasn't losing my mind, I figured one of my kids was behind it. Maybe with their friends. Some kind of secret party or prank. It never stopped. I just put up with it. I buy a new set of glasses about every 6 months. Now, years later, all the kids have moved out. I live alone. The glasses still keep disappearing. In fact, I need to go buy a new set soon. Story 4. Back in college, I dropped my wallet at the departure terminal. When dropping my sister off at the airport, I didn't realize until I got home and started tearing the place apart looking for it. Right when I was about to give up, I got a call on my cell from a shuttle driver who had found it on the ground. He found my college ID, and as luck would have it, his sister worked at the school's admissions office and got my number from the student directory. Even better, he happened to be in my neighborhood the next morning and could drop it off. Incredible. The next morning, I was woken by a sharp knock. Groggily, I answered the door, and there was a man in a shuttle driver uniform holding out my wallet. He handed it to me without saying a word. I stammered a thank you, and before I could offer a reward, he turned around and left. Once the warm feeling wore off, I realized something strange. At the time, I lived with 7 other people. The front door was always locked. No one saw or heard anything. No one let in a stranger at 8 a.m. The door the driver knocked on? It was my bedroom door. Story 5. At the start of the summer of 2004, I was at a friend's party to celebrate graduating from high school. The party was held in a remote area on my friend's parents' farm. There were maybe 40 or 50 of us, scattered around the fields with loud music, food, and drinks. Another friend and I got tired of the loud music, so we isolated ourselves and laid on our backs in the grass, staring at the sky. With almost no lights nearby, we could see many more stars than usual. A few minutes later, we saw one of the stars moving. We thought it was a satellite, but then we saw another, and another. Then we realized almost all the stars were moving, at the same speed, in the same direction. We could still see regular constellations in place, not moving, but maybe 100 or 200 lights just gliding across the sky. We hadn't had anything to drink, and it didn't resemble satellites or a meteor shower. I've tried for years to identify this phenomenon. I still have no explanation. Story 6. When I was a young kid, My mom bought me a toy miniature snooker table from the shop down the road. It was very cheap and entirely plastic. The balls had mold fins and wouldn't roll properly, so the only fun was dismantling the little cues. As I remember, the cues were made of two stick parts screwed together with a hard plastic ring in the middle. These rings were about the same size as my nostrils, so naturally I stuck them in one and shot them out by blowing through the other. Eventually, one of the rings never came out. I know it was stuck well up my nose at least until I went to sleep that night, and I don't remember ever finding it again. I didn't say anything about it at the time, though I was mildly terrified. So where is it? Is it still somewhere inside my head nearly 30 years later? Story 7. About 2 years ago, when I was 18, I moved in with my grandparents for around 7 months. The move was due to family issues, so very few people knew I had relocated. Living there was a difficult time in my life. Coping with the sudden change felt depressing and strange. One day I received an anonymous letter in the mail. It had no return address, and I had to pay the mailman 21 cents for the postage. There was no handwriting, only typed words, my name and my new address. The envelope was crinkled, paint splattered, and torn. As strange as that was, the contents were even stranger. Inside, wrapped in thin wax paper, was a torn piece of paper that read, "Freedom is a state of mind," with a picture of an open birdcage in the corner. Behind it was a single undeveloped photo, negative of something I still can't make out. I was new to the area and hadn't made any friends. Only my immediate family and my grandparents knew of the move. I asked everyone. No one I know sent the letter. But I have one idea. I never knew my birth mother. I was adopted at age 3 by my biological father. My grandparents have lived in the same place since I was born. I know it sounds unbelievable, and I tell myself I don't care. But what if my birth mother sent it in a time of need? Who knows? It's a mystery to me. The letter felt more unsettling than sweet. I still have it. Mysterious. Story 8. I used to work at a movie theater. One night I was closing, so I was there until around 11 p.m. or midnight. My manager asked if I wanted to stay after and watch a movie with him and some friends. We were allowed to watch whatever we wanted after closing, as long as we turned everything off before we left. I said yes and invited my friend to come too. My friend arrived around 12:30 a.m. and asked if I had a jacket she could borrow. I said yes and went to get it from my car. Everything was normal. The movie ended around 3 a.m. and we went to leave. That's when I saw all the windows on my car had been painted black. Even the side mirrors and the tiny little windows by the back doors were covered. My friend group used to tag each other's cars a lot, but we'd always draw silly things or write dumb teenage stuff. Luckily, since my friend had driven, she just took me home. The next morning, I came back and cleaned the windows. None of my friends ever admitted to doing it, which was odd because we always owned up to our pranks. Also, the only people who knew I was there that late were my friend and my manager, who were both inside with me. I guess it's possible my friend texted our other friends, but she was never really into pranking people, so it would have been out of character. Plus, she genuinely seemed surprised when we saw the car. This happened about 10 years ago, and I still have no idea who did it. Also, once at that theater, I found a squirrel lying perfectly spread out in the middle of my windshield. I was parked with the front of my car facing the theater, which is a tall building and not exactly squirrel accessible. I don't know if it was just an unfortunate accident or another bizarre prank. Story 9. These are actually 2 mysterious experiences, and I'm not sure if they're somehow connected. One day when I was around 7 or 8, I was playing in the backyard when I heard my mom calling me from the kitchen, like she usually did when I had been outside too long and she wanted to check on me. As always, I responded right away. A moment later, I heard the main gate open and close, so I peeked out to see who it was. It was my mom. She told me she had been at our neighbor's house returning something and had gotten caught up chatting. So who or what had called out to me from the kitchen? I could swear it was her exact voice and tone. Strangely, I wasn't scared. It was a bit unsettling, but I pushed the thought to the back of my mind. Fast forward several years, I was in my room studying for end-of-semester exams when I clearly heard a disembodied voice call me by my nickname. It sounded like a loud whisper, The kind of whisper you use when you're close to someone, but trying not to be heard by others. The voice came from the direction of my parents' bedroom, which was across from mine. I looked toward it and didn't hear anything, so I went back to studying. Then it happened again, same direction, and again it stopped when I turned toward it. It couldn't have been a prank. There was no one else in the house, and I could hear my parents talking in the living room. We didn't have any other people staying with us. It creeped me out, but I chalked it up to maybe an auditory hallucination. Looking back, maybe I just didn't want to find out what it really was. A few days later, I heard the voice again. This time during an exam at college. It felt like whoever or whatever it was stood right next to me and whispered directly into my ear. I haven't heard anything since. I still don't know what it was. Most people I've told, family included, think it was just in my head. Others lean towards something paranormal. I'm skeptical either way, so I guess it'll stay a mystery. Story 10. This is about a psychological episode I experienced while living in Australia. I've visited and lived in a few different places around the world, and Australia was one of them. I spent about 6 months there during my college years. It wasn't part of any study abroad program. I went there alone. I've always struggled to make friends and talk to strangers, so I quickly became isolated and confused. I didn't have a vehicle and lived on the outskirts of a small town, far from any major city. My housemates were almost never around. They usually went to Melbourne to stay with family. I was supposed to be in a college program, but I had such difficulty figuring out class schedules and getting around that I ended up falling into a depression and didn't go. After that, everything became a blur. I remember taking long walks late into the night, walking for miles through countryside in tiny towns that didn't even appear on most maps. I'd get hopelessly lost in hitch rides back with strangers. I remember the weather turning cold and windy. I felt very sick. I threw up a lot on the side of the road and zoned out on park benches for hours. I'd fall asleep on buses. I vaguely remember shops I walked into and foods I tried. Vanilla slices delicious. But I was so sick and tired all the time that I couldn't tell what was real and what I might have dreamed. I don't remember a solid 3-month stretch. Just being cold, sick, and confused. I had a few acquaintances. There are pictures of us together, but I don't remember their names, where they lived, or how we met. Just to be clear, no alcohol or drugs were involved. Eventually, I flew back to the States. My mom said I slept for 15 hours straight after arriving. My life today is normal and happy. I'm engaged, have a great job, and a good group of friends. Nothing like that has ever happened again. I'm sure I missed out on a lot of great experiences. I think if I went back under better circumstances, I'd enjoy it. But when I look back on my time in Australia, all I feel is confusion, sadness, and discomfort. Story 11. In 2016, I was living in a duplex with about 5 other people. Everyone had different sleep schedules, and there were usually 1 to 3 friends over at any given time. I generally went to bed around midnight, and my room was down a hallway from the common area. This meant I could hear whatever was happening out there. I can get very grumpy when I'm trying to sleep, and was known for walking out in a bathrobe in the middle of the night and yelling at everyone to be quiet. One night, as I was trying to fall asleep, I heard someone come in through the front door. The front door was right next to my bedroom, and there were 2 doors you had to walk through, so it was pretty loud. Whoever came in was talking and making noise right in the hallway outside my room. It was annoying, so I threw on my robe and walked out to tell them off. I wasn't wearing my glasses and have bad eyesight, so I didn't see their face clearly, but I thought I recognized them as one of my roommate's friends. They were a little taller than me. I'm 5 feet 3 inches, with short brown hair, and were facing away from me. I angrily told them to be quiet because I was trying to sleep and had to get up early. They started to turn around, but I immediately went back to my room, so I never really saw their face. There was no one else out there. When I woke up, I texted my roommates to ask if anyone had been over that night. I also messaged the person I thought it was to ask if he had stopped by. No one had been over, and none of my roommates or friends fit the description of the person I saw. To this day, I have no idea who it was. We didn't always keep the front doors locked, and sometimes my roommates or their friends were under the influence, so they might not have remembered the interaction. Story 12. We stayed at a ridiculously cheap Airbnb. When we booked it, it looked nice, but when we arrived, we were surprised to find it was in a mansion in a major city and cost almost nothing. We searched the room for cameras or anything suspicious because the place had it all. A jacuzzi, pool table, library room, multiple kitchens, a pool, wine cellar, tons of weirdly empty rooms, 2 gardens, and more. There were no other guests during the entire week we stayed there. The host lived on the property in another area and was very attractive and often in various states of undress. No complaints. While being very friendly, there were little things that made me suspect they might have been involved in the adult entertainment industry. During conversations, they mentioned they would soon stop renting through Airbnb. After we left, I noticed something strange. The house now shown in our booking history and invoice was a completely different, much more modest one. Their profile had been completely changed. It's one of those situations where I'm incredibly grateful for the luxurious experience, but I'm left confused about what actually happened. I took some videos of the place, and I still know where it is, but it feels like a dream I can't fully prove happened. The whole thing felt like a much more pleasant version of a thriller movie. Story 13. I was on vacation in Malaysia, and when I got to the hotel room, I noticed the small water hose next to the toilet, commonly found in many Asian countries, had been spraying water all over the bathroom. The floor was soaked, the staff was very friendly and cleaned it right away, and I made sure the faucet was tightly sealed. Later that night, I woke up and went to use the bathroom. The little hose was fully open again, spraying water all over the place. To some, this might seem like a minor inconvenience, but Southeast Asia is known for its countless ghost stories, and I had heard many of them just days before my stay at that hotel. During the same trip, I also saw a gardener at a resort on an island talking to himself at night. I was told he was talking to his friends whenever he was on the island, though on the mainland, he was said to be completely normal and rational. The hotel with the mysterious faucet had a reputation for being haunted. I'm generally a very skeptical person and always try to find rational explanations for things, like water pressure issues. But this still felt strange. Story 14. I was pushing carts during my shift one day, and if you're familiar with grocery store parking lots, you know there are metal cart returns scattered throughout. I was doing my job, collecting carts, when a man parked next to the cart return called me over. He pointed toward a man and woman walking to their car and said, "You see her over there? She's married to insert name. I think she's cheating on him with the man next to her. But I'm not sure if it's actually her." I didn't know where this was going, so I just said, "Okay," and was about to walk away when he asked me to yell, "Pam," to see if it was really her. I yelled the name, and she turned around and paused for a moment, but didn't seem too surprised. She was unlocking her trunk to load groceries. The man in the car reclined his seat when I yelled and asked if she had turned around. He mumbled something about her getting caught, and I just went on with my day. I still wonder if I accidentally exposed someone named Pam, who might have just been out shopping with a friend. Story 15. In 2006, while working on an old car in the driveway at night with my nephew and a friend, we heard the sound of approaching helicopters. Curious because they were flying so low, we looked up as they got closer. There were 3 helicopters flying in a reverse triangle formation, 2 in front and 1 in back. Seeing 3 helicopters flying together at night was odd enough that we kept watching as they passed almost directly over our heads. Then we saw it, a massive black triangle-shaped craft flying silently between the helicopters. It had no lights and blocked out the sky as it passed. My nephew and his friend were freaking out, yelling, "What was that?" I just stood there in disbelief, thinking, "They're real." We all saw the same thing. It was a real flying black triangle, at least 150 feet long, flying low and slow. Around the speed helicopters fly, I believe they were Black Hawks, which would mean about 170 miles per hour. The craft flew no more than a few hundred, maybe 1,000 feet above the ground. And no, it was not a B-2 bomber. What we saw was a perfect equilateral triangle. So the mystery remains, and it's anything but minor. What was that thing? Who built it? What was it used for? How did it stay airborne at such low speeds? Why didn't it have navigation lights? What branch of the military was operating it and the helicopters? Why were they flying so low over Middle Tennessee at night? Where were they going? And why, 12 years later, has no one ever been able to prove they exist? Story 16. The strangest, most puzzling thing that's ever happened to me occurred about half a year ago. I was briefly working a job at a college bookstore, where one of my tasks was to call customers who had ordered books that were out of stock and let them know we had received their books. I had already called a large number of customers that day and was in the groove. I had the process figured out. Either someone answered and I followed a script to inform them about their book, or I got their voicemail and used a slightly different script, simple enough. Until I called one number and got neither. Just silence. It threw me off a little, and after a few seconds I hung up. I called back again. This time, I heard what sounded like someone picking up and quietly listening. But for some reason, I held my tongue and just listened too. I could hear faint background noises like people talking. Then I heard a quiet, "Hey, how can I help you today?" A man responded with something like, "I need to pick up my book." I was confused for a split second, until my coworker, who was standing behind me at the desk, suddenly said, "Hey, how can I help you today?" She was speaking to a customer, a man who told her, "I need to pick up my book." Suddenly I got goosebumps. I kept listening. On the phone, I heard their conversation. About a second before it happened in real life, I hung up, walked away from the desk, and told my coworkers, "I'm going on my break." My break consisted mostly of me sitting at a table outside, silently freaking out. I didn't make any more phone calls for the rest of the day and never told anyone what had happened. Story 17. Every day as a kid on the way to school, we would drive past the mall. On the other side of the road was a big rock face that high school students often spray painted. There was all kinds of stuff on it, band names, couples declaring love, some artwork, and so on. But way up at the top, someone had spray painted in bold white letters, "Mr. Stout is a turd packer." I looked at that every day. Whoever painted it was seriously committed. It was way at the top. There's no way you could have done it from a ladder. You'd have to climb behind the rock, all the way up, lie down, and paint it upside down. That person went through so much effort just to make that declaration. I always wondered who did it and who Mr. Stout was to deserve that kind of attention. I moved to a different town before high school, and this was before social media really took off. But once Facebook became popular, I tried to look him up. With so little info, it was almost impossible. Maybe he never made a Facebook account. Either way, I'll never know. Story 18. When I was in 7th grade, there was a brief period where someone kept tearing up our notebooks and textbooks during our physical education period. One day, our homeroom teacher sat us down and said she knew who was doing it. She warned that if it didn't stop, she would call them out in front of the whole class, and just like that, it stopped. Life went on. 5 years later, in 12th grade, our former 7th grade homeroom teacher came in as a substitute. By that point, many students had transferred and new ones had joined, so only about 5 or 6 of us were from that original class. We joked around and asked her if she would finally tell us who the culprit was. She replied seriously that the person was still in our class, and she didn't want to tell us because she didn't want us to change how we saw them. No matter how much we begged, she wouldn't say, "I still wonder who it was, and if I'm still friends with them." Story 19. When I was little, my sister and I stayed the night at our great-grandma's house. After she went to sleep, my sister and I stayed up talking in bed. Around 2 in the morning, we started hearing someone running through the house. We heard footsteps going from the hallway to the kitchen, then to the bathroom right next to our bedroom. The bathroom door would slam, then after a few minutes it would open and the running would start again. This went on for about 10 minutes and then suddenly stopped. My sister and I were crying, too scared to get out of bed and check. At the time, I was convinced it was a ghost. To this day, it still creeps me out. My great-grandma lived alone, and she was elderly, not exactly in running condition. Looking back, maybe it was a break-in? But I don't remember the house being a mess in the morning, and she didn't say anything about anything being missing. We never told her what happened. My sister and I still have no idea. Story 20. I work at Starbucks, and we used to have a pair of regular customers who came in once a week or so. She would order something, and he would just sit with her. It was always odd because they never talked. She would sip her drink and scroll on her phone, while he just sat there silently. I assumed they were a couple, though there was a big age difference. She looked to be in her mid to late 50s, and he looked maybe late 20s or early 30s. They didn't look alike either. She wore makeup, had blonde highlights, and was well dressed. He looked more like a laid-back 30-year-old into tabletop games. I figured maybe they had some kind of unusual dynamic. One day she came in alone. Then again, and again, a few visits went by, and he never showed up. During casual conversation, I asked, "Where's the guy that's usually in here with you?" She looked at me like I was out of my mind and said, "My husband?" I said, "Sure, I guess." She replied, "I don't think he's ever come in here with me." She explained that they lived an hour away, and she always stopped in on her way home from work to avoid traffic. I said, "Yeah, the guy with the long brown hair and glasses." I'll never forget the look on her face. Sadness, fear, and maybe anger. I handed her the drink and she just turned and walked out without another word. I thought that was weird, so I mentioned it to a coworker. She asked, "You mean the lady who gets the Earl Grey with soy?" I said yes. She told me she had only ever seen her alone. Another coworker said the same thing. After that, she never came back. Story 21. Ever since I was young, I've loved scary movies. Ghosts, killers, terrifying monsters. I liked them because they were just movies, just a little scare for fun, but I wouldn't rule out the idea that ghosts could be real, especially since I've had a few strange, shared experiences. My whole family enjoys scary movies, except my dad. For as long as I can remember, he's never liked them. I never thought much of it. After all, everyone has different tastes. Some people just don't enjoy being scared. But I always felt like there was something deeper behind it, though I never gave it much thought. When I was a little younger, I kept questioning him to see if there was more to it than just not liking horror movies. Every time, he avoided the subject and changed the topic. I don't know what finally made him give in. Maybe he got tired of me asking, but he eventually gave a vague explanation. He said that he had once done a Ouija board session with his parents, brother, and uncles in the house, and that something happened that he didn't want to talk about. That was it. No details. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Exactly what I thought. That sounds made up. I assumed he was just trying to scare me into dropping the subject. And it worked. For a while. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought about all the times we went to that house for get-togethers or holidays. It always felt odd. It's a feeling I still can't explain. My parents are close and don't keep secrets from one another. So when I found out about the Ouija board incident, I immediately went to my mom. I figured she'd know if my dad was just joking around. But she didn't. She had no idea it had happened. He had never told her anything about it. That was weird. Fast forward to a car ride on the way to the Christmas party at my grandmother's house. I decided to ask my dad again, this time in a situation where he couldn't avoid the question. But instead of giving in, he sighed and told my sister and me very seriously to forget about it and never, under any circumstances, ask our grandmother about it. I guess he thought that warning would make us drop it, but it only made me more curious. When we got to my grandmother's house, I ran straight to my cousins and told them everything. One of them asked our uncle about it during their ride home. She said that when she brought it up, he went from smiling and chatting to totally blank, just cold and serious. He asked how she knew and told her never to mention it again, especially not to our grandmother. Fast forward to now. I still don't know what happened, and I don't think I ever will. Maybe it's not the biggest mystery in the world, but it's definitely something that stuck with me, and I still want to know the truth. Story 22. From grade 8 through grade 9, I had an online relationship with someone, another student from my school, who refused to reveal his identity. It started when he emailed me using an address that made it seem like he was my crush. For several emails, he pretended to be that person, until he admitted he wasn't. He said he was someone else who liked me. The entire relationship took place through emails. As corny as it sounds, he called himself Mystery Man, but he never told me who he really was. At the time, I was a very troubled teen. The relationship became incredibly important to me. Now, as an adult, I realize how strange it was to form such deep feelings for a stranger online. But back then, I was severely depressed, struggling with self-harm, suicidal thoughts, and substance issues. This anonymous person became someone I trusted and confided in daily. When I felt like I had no one else, eventually he connected with my best friend, and they started emailing too. One day he asked her to help him reveal his identity to me. Instead of emailing me directly, he sent her a message to show me. Odd, right? The person he claimed to be turned out not to be him. I checked. We had a big falling out and stopped talking. I moved on and formed other relationships that helped me heal. But as an adult, I still think about that experience often. I've tried to figure out who he was, going through old high school yearbooks. But after 14 years, all those people are strangers to me now. Sometimes I wonder if it was my best friend all along, maybe as a twisted prank or just a way to get personal information out of me. It's all just speculation at this point. But still, it's one of the weirdest and most lingering mysteries from my teenage years. Story 23. I wouldn't necessarily call this insignificant, but it happened about 15 years ago. I was at an airport during a layover, sitting by myself deep in thought about something in my life that I had been avoiding. It was something important, something I knew I needed to deal with, but I kept convincing myself there was still plenty of time. Eventually, they called for boarding. As I was walking toward the terminal, a man in a red and black flannel shirt walked past me, close enough that I had to move slightly to avoid bumping into him. All he said was, "It's later than you think." I froze for a second. That single sentence was somehow directly related to what I had been thinking about for the past half hour. It wasn't a generic comment. It felt like a specific response to my thoughts. After about 5 seconds, I turned around to look for him. He was gone. It was a small airport. Even if he had sprinted around a corner the moment he passed me, I still don't think he could have gotten out of sight that fast. Nobody around me seemed surprised or even noticed anything. I still don't know what to make of it. Story 24. Oh, I forgot about this. I was a college student on spring break in Daytona. This young woman kept staring at me all day. She was cute, so I thought, okay, I'll go talk to her. I introduced myself and we chatted for a bit. She told me she had to catch up with her friends who were leaving, which was true. I saw them getting into a car. In my infinite wisdom, I didn't get her number. The next day, same beach, same time, I saw her again. She was staring at me the same way. I went over to talk to her again, and she literally had no idea who I was. I know for a fact it was the same girl. I never forget a face. Still, we talked a bit, and then I left to bar crawl with my buddies. This time, I didn't even try to get her number because the whole thing felt too weird. The very next day, she found me again. Same time, different beach. This time, she walked up with an older man. She introduced me by name to her father. We were on the beach, and this guy was in a full tailored suit and dress shoes. She said it was her dad, and the three of us chatted. He was very interested in my life and my goals. I was pre-med at the time. It was mostly him and me talking, while she just stood there smiling at me the whole time. Then he said it was nice to meet me, shook my hand, kissed her on the forehead, and left. At this point, I was seriously creeped out. I told her I'd see her tomorrow, and she said, "Cool." Keep in mind, we didn't exchange numbers or make plans for where to meet. I stayed away from the beaches on my last day and got out of Florida. Years later, I watched the movie Get Out, and it instantly reminded me of that trip. It freaked me out and gave me chills. I'll never know what that was all about, and honestly, I don't want to. Story 25. A lot of strange stuff happened at my house when I was a kid. I remember coming home from school, and my grandma would leave to pick up my little brother, so I was alone for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. I used to hear banging in the kitchen or heavy breathing, like the sound people make when wearing a respirator in movies. I'd get scared and cover my ears. There must have been some logical explanation for it. There were scratches on the walls when I was trying to sleep too, but I figured birds were getting into the roof. The other strange thing was that, for a couple of years, my little brother refused to go upstairs by himself. That's where the bathroom and bedrooms were. He would often wake up screaming in the night. One time I asked why he wanted me to walk him to the bathroom, since I was in the middle of a game. And he said, "The men upstairs say mean things to me." I took him up there, but of course, there was nothing there. I've brought up the strange noises before, and no one in the family remembers anything like that. My little brother doesn't remember telling me any of that or seeing anything weird. In fact, he barely remembers the house at all. Just a few family events. Story 26. This happened about 3 years ago. I left home one morning to visit a customer at a new location. I decided to take the bus because, even though it took longer, it meant I wouldn't have to switch trains on the subway, which is always chaos in the morning. Everything was fine until I left the customer site in the evening. That time I chose the subway because I didn't want the long bus ride again. The train arrived. I checked the time to see if I could grab groceries on the way home. I even texted my sister about something unrelated just before boarding. And then, nothing. I don't remember anything after that. It was like I woke up walking up the stairs at my destination station. I stopped mid-step, looked around, totally confused. I checked the station clock, checked the time on my phone. It was only 8 minutes after I had texted my sister, which made no sense. The ride should have taken 25 minutes. Even if I had changed trains instantly, which is almost impossible, it would have taken at least 15 minutes. Plus, this was my first time taking that specific route, so it's not like I could have gone into autopilot. I never figured out what happened. It hasn't happened again, but I still think about it from time to time. Story 27. When I was 6, I went to live with my dad. On my mom's side, I have an uncle who's only a couple of years older than me. One time, my dad let him stay the night. We played and had fun. Nothing unusual. The next day, my parents took us to an Italian restaurant for lunch, and I vividly remember the amazing spaghetti I had. After lunch, I was sitting in the back seat of the car, talking to my uncle. That's when my stepmom turned around and asked, "Who are you talking to?" I said, "Luke," and turned toward the seat next to me. He wasn't there. He hadn't gone to lunch with us. My grandma had picked him up that morning. But I clearly remember spending several hours with him that day. At my first foster home in 6th grade, something similar happened. I almost never missed school unless I had therapy. But one Monday, everyone asked me where I had been on Friday. My teachers, classmates, even the lunch lady. I had no memory of missing school. When I asked my foster parents, they said they dropped me off and picked me up like normal. I've had smaller strange things happen, but those 2 moments are the ones that really haunt me. Story 28. This happened when I was 19 years old. I was planning my first international trip with a friend and her mom. 3 weeks before the departure, I had a streak of really bad luck. I couldn't find my passport, so my mom and I went to get an emergency one. Somehow I lost that new passport and had to get another one. And guess what? The second new passport disappeared that same day. I was supposed to leave in just 3 days. That same day, I suddenly felt very sick. My mom took me to the emergency room, and overnight, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. The doctor advised me to cancel the trip, saying it was dangerous to travel, especially long distance, with pneumonia. 2 nights before the trip, my mom, younger sister, 2 cousins, 2 aunts, and 1 uncle all had the same dream. In the dream, I was kidnapped. That very same night, I had the exact same dream. It was so vivid, I decided to cancel the trip the night before departure. My friend and her mom went without me. I didn't tell my friend why I had canceled until she came back. In my dream, we had rented a green 1997 Toyota Corolla. We were at a large intersection. I remembered the names of the streets and could even recall the stores I saw on that street. I even remembered what she was wearing. We were stopped at a red light when 2 men opened the back door and kidnapped me. In the dream, the right rear door lock didn't work, making it easier for them to grab me. It felt terrifyingly real. When I finally told my friend about the dream, she was completely freaked out. The car they rented matched exactly what I saw in the dream. The dress she wore that day was a dress her mom had bought for her at a market in Lima, Peru. I also described the streets and storefronts in perfect detail, and just to make it even weirder. The next day, my mom and I found the passports that had kept disappearing, and my pneumonia, completely gone overnight. To this day, I still wonder how it was possible that 8 people, including myself, had the exact same dream the night before the trip. Story 29. I had this really nice purse that I absolutely loved. It wasn't expensive or designer, just had a beautiful design and was the perfect fit for me. One weekend, my ex and I went out of town for a few nights. When we came back, I unpacked everything from the purse, charger, headphones, wallet, and set it on the hallway shelf where I always kept it. I didn't think anything of it. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., I went out and didn't return until about 2 a.m. I had left the door unlocked. When I got back, the purse was gone. My ex and I tore the apartment apart, but it was nowhere to be found. It was so upsetting because I'm very careful about where I put my things. I rarely misplace anything. Fortunately, I only had to replace my Medicare card, but still, it could have been much worse. We lived in a smaller town in Atlantic Canada, in a pretty good neighborhood, but I'm convinced someone walked in while my ex was in his gaming room and just took the purse. We broke up and moved out about 2 months later, got rid of a lot of stuff, and the purse was never found. Story 30. This will probably get buried, but that somehow feels fitting. The house I grew up in was a semi-attached unit, probably built in the 1970s. According to some people, it was built where a priory once stood, just to make it extra eerie. The living room always had this strange, unpleasant smell. I never noticed it growing up, but my parents and guests always commented on it. My parents had bought the house at a very low price because the previous owner needed money quickly. Neighbors said the man's wife had left him, so they assumed they were going through a divorce. As far as my parents were concerned, it was a great deal. One day my dad was working in the garden when the neighbor in the attached house asked for help with something. He led my dad into a small basement below his house. My dad was surprised. The houses were supposed to be identical, and ours didn't have a basement. The neighbor said, "You should have one. I've been in it before." They went over to our side, looked around, and discovered that our basement had been filled in. No one in the neighborhood remembered it being filled or knew when it happened. Ever since I found that out, my siblings and I have wondered, was the previous tenant's wife buried under the house? There was no clear explanation for the filled-in basement. The wife supposedly left, but no one really knew the details. The man sold the house quickly and cheaply, and that lingering smell in the living room, the one right above where the basement would have been, never went away. Story 31. I had moved away for a short while in middle school and came back for 8th grade. While I was away, my sister told me to say hi to Rudy for her, because every time she ran into him, he'd say hi and ask when I'd be coming back. Rudy was the name of a really close friend of mine. According to my sister, we'd hung out a lot, he'd slept over a few times, and we both loved video games. He was also close friends with my best friend. When I saw Rudy again at school, we started hanging out. He was incredibly friendly and just fun to be around. One of those people who makes everything better. The problem is, I have absolutely no idea who he was. I don't remember ever meeting him before he reintroduced himself in 8th grade. I have no recollection of someone named Rudy, and as far as I know, only one friend had ever slept over at my house. Rudy did become my friend again, but whenever I asked how we originally met, he'd just laugh and never tell me. I lost track of him after high school. And even now, every time I think about him, I still wonder, who was he? Story 32. This might be hard to explain, so feel free to ask questions. When my fiancé and I first moved in together, we had the tiniest apartment you can imagine. I've seen studio apartments bigger than that 2-bedroom place. One day we woke up and his phone was gone. It wasn't on our bedside table, which is where he always left it. I tried calling it, but it was dead. We searched our tiny room and then moved into the living room. No luck. We kept looking for a full week. I really can't emphasize how small that apartment was. We searched every single inch of it. Eventually, he gave up and got a new phone. About a month and a half later, we stopped looking entirely. That same week, we decided to go on a date and hired a babysitter we hadn't seen in over 3 months. We got home around 1 a.m., and she commented on the phone that wouldn't stop ringing. It had been sitting on the coffee table and ringing nonstop since we left. We were stunned. We still have absolutely no idea how the phone ended up back on the coffee table or where it had been that whole time. But I promise you, it was definitely not sitting there the whole time. Story 33. In 1st grade, I had a best friend named Keaton. Truth be told, I don't remember much about him, but I remember loving him like a brother. One day, he didn't show up for class, and I told my mom. She got very quiet. About a week later, the teachers told our class that Keaton and his mom had moved away. I felt really sad. He hadn't even said goodbye. On the way home, I mentioned it to my mom, telling her how sad and suspicious it all felt, especially since Keaton's dad was still in town. That's when my mom told me the truth, because she knew how close we were. Keaton and his family had been on their way to a family outing when a drunk driver hit the passenger side of their car. Keaton and his mom didn't survive. His dad and his baby sister, who was just a few months old at the time, did. At first, I didn't cry. I just understood that something had happened. But later, I broke down when I realized I would never see him again at recess to play in color with. I attended the funeral a few days later. I don't remember much, just that it was raining and the casket was so small. His dad was screaming and crying, and it was heartbreaking to witness. Afterward, they moved away. But I've always wondered how they're doing. And one question that stayed with me, though it might sound strange or insignificant to others, is why the driver was drunk. Where was he going? How did he feel afterward? Has he changed? I know he's still out there somewhere, and I've always wondered about the man who took my best friend and his mom away from me. I still miss Keaton, in a way that never really faded. Story 34. My mom had this book when I was little. I used to pick it up about twice a month and read the first couple of pages. It started with a story about falling asleep, and in the dream, you picked up a flower, and when you woke up, it would be lying on your chest. I only read the first 2 pages because the rest was too complex for me at the time. It was about parallel universes, the multiverse, and multidimensional travel, how you could access these realms if you were trained, or sometimes how they would find you. The book had a blue hardcover with a transcendental drawing of a man on the front. The last time I remember seeing it, I was about 14. I'm 20 now. Last year, I asked my mom about the book, and she told me she didn't remember ever having it. Never saw it, never heard of it. I've spent hours searching for it online. I've asked bookstores, avid readers, even a shaman. Nobody knows about this book but me. It played a huge role in my childhood and deeply influenced how I see the world. I think about it every single day. Sometimes I wonder if maybe it wasn't a normal book. Maybe it came from somewhere else, meant just for me, to spark my interest in parallel universes and the multiverse. Because of that book, I'm now studying to become a theoretical physicist, trying to understand the universe we live in. Story 35. This happened when I was 19 years old. I was planning my first international trip with a friend and her mom 3 weeks before the departure. Everything started going wrong. I couldn't find my passport, so my mom and I went to get an emergency one. Somehow I lost the new passport, got a replacement, and that one disappeared the same day. I was supposed to leave in 3 days. That same day, I suddenly felt very sick. My mom took me to the ER, and overnight, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. The doctor advised me to cancel the trip. It would be dangerous to travel, especially such a long distance, with pneumonia. 2 nights before departure, my mom, younger sister, 2 cousins, 2 aunts, 1 uncle, and I all had the same dream. In it, I was kidnapped. It was eerie. I decided to cancel the trip the night before. My friend and her mom went without me. I didn't tell them why at the time. When they came back, I finally told them. In my dream, we had rented a green 1997 Toyota Corolla. We were at a large intersection. I remembered the names of the streets and even the storefronts. I could describe exactly what my friend was wearing. We were at a stoplight when 2 men opened the car door and kidnapped me. The lock on the right back seat door didn't work, making it easier for them. It felt incredibly real. I described the dream to my friend, including the broken door lock, the rented car, her outfit, and the street details in Lima, Peru. She was visibly freaked out. The car they rented matched what I had seen. The dress she wore was something her mom had bought at a local market. I even got the street and store names right. And to make it even creepier, the next day my mom and I found the passports that had gone missing. And my pneumonia? Gone overnight. I still don't know how it was possible that 8 people, including me, had the exact same dream the night before I was supposed to leave. Story 36. This bizarre and terrifying situation didn't happen to me. It happened to my dad. He's been partially deaf for most of my life and speaks really loudly. One day he randomly lost his voice and sounded strange when he tried to talk. He cleared his throat and suddenly started projectile vomiting a large amount of blood. He continued vomiting blood and had to be rushed to the emergency room. The doctors were shocked at the amount of blood coming out of his mouth, especially since he had no other symptoms. No pain, just nonstop vomiting of what seemed like buckets of blood. They did every test imaginable. Cameras down his throat, scans, x-rays, even exploratory procedures. Nothing explained the bleeding. We were preparing for the worst. He kept talking about how he wanted his funeral to be, all while still vomiting unnatural amounts of blood for nearly 2 days. And then it just stopped. The bleeding suddenly ceased. The doctors ran more tests, and they still found zero medical explanation. So they discharged him. Now here's the weirdest part. As we were leaving the hospital, my dad suddenly stopped, looking confused. He asked what the strange buzzing sound was. It turned out he could hear the cicadas buzzing in the trees, something he hadn't heard in decades. He hadn't even been able to hear normal voices since he was about 23 years old. For 3 months, he could hear almost perfectly. Then just as suddenly as it came back, his hearing returned to his previous state of partial deafness. We still have no idea what caused the vomiting, the recovery, or the brief return of his hearing. To this day, it remains a complete mystery. Story 37. I had a very close friend for over 10 years back in the 1960s. We met in 7th grade after I moved to town. We shared the same sense of humor, an appreciation for irony, and a love for books, music, art, and travel. We weren't into sports, but we connected on everything else. We became best friends in junior high and stayed close for years. When he transferred to a private school in 10th grade, we still saw each other often. We took trips together, explored places, and exchanged long letters during college. I even drove 7 hours once just to visit him at his campus. Between the ages of 12 and 22, I learned so much from him about music, literature, politics. He was always a few steps ahead of me, and I admired him deeply. One summer day, I went to his house, as I had done so many times before. Nothing unusual, just stopping by. I parked in the gravel driveway and knocked on the front door. Eventually, he opened it. He was barefoot and just stood there looking at me. I probably said hi, and then he slammed the door in my face. I was stunned. I just stood there for a moment, unsure of what had happened. Eventually, I got in my car and left, assuming he'd call and explain. But he never did. Weeks went by. I never saw him again. I haven't spoken to him in almost 50 years. He's now a doctor with a long list of credentials. A mutual friend once asked if he should try to reconnect us. It had been 40 years by then. I said, no thanks, but I didn't really mean it. To this day, I still wonder what happened that day and why someone I cared about so much shut me out without a word. Story 38. I was taking the subway back to Queens from a bar in Lower Brooklyn around 4:30 a.m. I was alone in the train car when 2 men boarded, clearly together, but they didn't sit next to each other. One sat directly across from me, while the other walked to the opposite end of the car and sat facing his friend. I had my earbuds in and was playing solitaire on my tablet, so I didn't pay much attention at first. But then I noticed the guy across from me making hand signals to the other man. That got my attention. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were hearing impaired? But if that were the case, wouldn't they sit next to each other? I made eye contact with the guy across from me for a few seconds too long, so he'd know I was alert. Then I looked toward his friend and gave a puzzled frown. Neither of them reacted, but after that, the hand signal stopped. I went back to what I was doing. When I exited the train, I must have dropped my scarf. The guy across from me tapped my shoulder on my way out and handed it back to me with a smile. I thanked him. For a moment, I'd considered following them just out of curiosity, but I was wearing a bright pink coat and clearly wouldn't blend in. Plus, it obviously wasn't a safe idea. I let it go, but I'll always wonder what they were doing and whether I was in any kind of danger that night. My boyfriend later mentioned that there are sometimes predatory teams that target late-night travelers, especially women. I don't know if that's true, but it's a chilling thought. Story 39. I've shared this before, but I don't think anyone saw it. We had a party one summer that went on until about 7 a.m. There was a big fire going, and maybe 30 people packed into a small terraced house in the UK. We had music, beer pong. It was loud. It was a Saturday night during a long weekend. And we even invited our only neighbor, since the house on the other side was unoccupied. During the cleanup, I found a shattered pint glass filled with human waste in the front yard. There was also a huge smear across the front of the house. The angle of the smear made it seem like the glass had been thrown from a top-floor window parallel to ours. What's strange is the glass was broken, but it had stayed intact because the contents were holding the shards together, which suggested the impact hadn't been all that strong. There were no police called, no knocks at the door, and no noise complaints. Just a pint glass filled with waste, gently tossed at my house. I can't imagine someone in a fit of rage thinking, "You know what? I'll quietly relieve myself into a pint glass and softly toss it at their wall." Who does that? It still keeps me up at night, knowing I'll probably never understand the thought process behind it. Story 40. This started as a small mystery and turned into something much bigger. For me, at least. In high school, I was in a class with a girl a grade below me. We were semi-friends, so I'd say hi when I saw her. The following year, I saw someone in the hallway who looked just like her, but much taller. I figured she had a growth spurt, which isn't unheard of in high school. I hesitated, unsure if it was her or someone who just looked like her, and went the other way. A few days later, I saw her in the bathroom, normal height, and we chatted a bit. Mystery solved, right? Must have been someone else. Then one day I saw the tall version again at a locker. At that point, I assumed maybe she had a younger but taller sister or cousin, because they looked exactly alike. I stood nearby waiting for class to start, and then I saw another tall version of her walk up to the first one. Identical face, same height, same hair. It was like seeing twins, and I was completely certain they were absolutely identical. I kept seeing them around school throughout the year. It was kind of funny to me. Two taller versions of my friend walking around. A couple of years later, I was working at a restaurant when the original friend got hired. Cool. Then her younger sister got hired too, one of the twins. I casually mentioned to a coworker that the other twin wasn't working with us, and they looked confused. What other twin? Turns out her younger sister isn't a twin. This haunted me for weeks. I eventually worked up the nerve to ask her directly, and she confirmed it. She never had a twin, but I remember seeing two of them multiple times, and I've never been able to make sense of it. Story 41. This happened during my sophomore or junior year of high school. I was walking down the hallway when I noticed a handmade flyer taped to the wall. It looked like a wanted poster with a pencil drawing of a parrot. The text said something like, "If you see this magical parrot, you will have good luck." The handwriting looked like it came from a student, kind of boyish and scribbled in pencil. I thought it was odd, but dismissed it as just another one of those quirky pass-it-on-for-luck things that were popular at the time. Later that day, I was walking through the teacher's parking lot on the other side of campus when I saw it. Perched on top of a red Jeep Wrangler, clear as day, was a real parrot. At first, I thought I had to be hallucinating. I was alone, and I got closer just to be sure. But it was real. A live parrot, just sitting there, preening itself and looking around. Eventually, it flew away, but not before I was completely convinced it was real. This was before phones had cameras, so I couldn't document it. And to be clear, this was in the southwestern U.S., where parrots are not native. I figured someone's pet must have escaped. A few days later, I passed through the drama department and noticed a stuffed macaw parrot near one of the teacher's doors. It had a note pinned to it that said something like, "You found me." It was clearly referencing the same parrot from the flyer. I've never been able to convince anyone that I saw a live parrot that day. That alone would have been weird enough. But the fact that I saw the poster first, then the real bird, and then the stuffed one later, it all felt like some kind of magical trick. Still one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me.